Welcome to the Future of Supply Chain, presented by Dynamo. Each episode, we sit down with leaders in the industry as we build the future of supply chain together. Let's get into the show. Here's our host, Santosh Sankar.
Hey, ladies and gents, welcome back to the Future of Supply Chain podcast. I'm your host, Santosh Sankar. Joining me today is Conrad Snover, CEO of ProcureAbility. Welcome, Conrad.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we are going to really get into it today when it comes to the concept of procurement and really kind of looking at procurement in and around the utility sector. But before we kind of get into all that good stuff, I'd love for you just to share the elevator pitch around ProcureAbility with the audience.
Sure. Yeah, ProcureAbility, we're a full suite of procurement services. We're a procurement services company. And what I mean by the full suite is we have consulting. We have a consulting practice, like ad hoc support, project-based teams to solve immediate problems. And that's often process or organization redesigns or technology implementations or upgrades, all in the procurement space. And then we also have longer-term managed services teams designed to augment and provide flex capacity to our clients' internal teams, again, focused on procurement. So end-to-end procurement from strategy through execution, and then a couple different deployment models, like I just mentioned. We've been around for 30 years, and I've been here 25, and it's been a really fun journey, and to see how we've evolved the company to provide that complex suite of services for our clients.
Amazing. And what's the Conrad Snover story? How did you kind of get into this wild, wonderful world of procurement?
Well, I've been in procurement my whole life. My first job was in procurement doing strategic sourcing. So if I think about that, the answer to your question, I've really focused on operations and ultimately procurement, ultimately focusing on helping customers obtain, outsized value from truly strategic and creative solutions to category management and strategic sourcing. Things that don't come from traditional reactive procurement approach, things like, hey, I need to go buy something. Can you get me 3 bids and I'll choose the best one? But really taking a very unique and creative look to what are we buying and why are we buying it and who do we buy it from and how many people buy the same thing and how should we do this differently? And are we buying this in the right way for the supply market? Are we just organized internally and really fixing all that to take all the waste out of the process and create much more value through cost savings or lower total cost or just better value-based solutions. Now, ProcureAbility, we've built into the leading procurement services firm in the US by ensuring we have happy employees who in turn deliver excellent results for our customer satisfaction in the procurement space. And just to finish off the story here for you on that, we are on the path now to taking our domestic leadership global. So as of 2 years ago, we're part of Jabil. Jabil is an engineering-led manufacturing company, $30 billion global company, who incidentally is also the leader in managing complex integrated global supply chain solutions for 500 customers across Jabil's network of 100 plants in 30 countries. So very, very complex supply chain. So it's a match made in heaven to take ProcureAbility's capabilities global.
Amazing. And so jumping into it, you've previously written about the business case for sustainable procurement. I'd love just to kind of talk through what that actually means and how you and the team at ProcureAbility have practically implemented that concept on behalf of your various customers.
Sure. Well, in my mind, sustainability means 2 things. So we approach it from one of these 2 lenses, or ideally both. Number one, sustainability means security. And what I mean by that is security of supply. Number 2, sustainability means responsibility. So eliminating waste and inefficiency and, sort of running maybe a more efficient supply chain, if you will, more responsible supply chain. So responsibility is the second one. So on the first one, what I mean by this is if you're the procurement leader of an organization, you have a responsibility to run a sustainable supply chain. What I mean by that is one that doesn't break. I want something that's rigorous. I want something that is robust, that is manages risks appropriately, has alternative sources of supply where needed, and diversifies the supply base, the supplier base, the manufacturing, the geographic base, and ensures that the supply chain is robust. And that is a sustainable supply chain. So that's double click on the first one. Double clicking on the second one, this is everything from ensuring that us and our suppliers of suppliers are following labor laws. We're using responsible labor in different countries, that we are shipping the right way, that we are not wasting natural resources, that we're respecting and taking care of this place we live on planet Earth. And we're just doing things responsibly. There's a lot of debate around this part of the supply chain. Like, are we doing things that are more expensive? And is that the right use of resources? And so I say, well, we all agree that we don't want to waste anything. And so let's just do less wasteful things. Let's have a less wasteful supply chain. Let's have a more responsible supply chain. If we don't waste, it'll cost less money. So we'll have savings. So it's really the right thing to do. It's the responsible thing to do, regardless of any other perspective. And so that's how we see sustainable procurement. I don't know if you have a different angle or if I missed anything.
No. And do you find that over time, this concept is becoming a table stakes demand from customers, or customers still trying to understand how to themselves think about this concept of sustainability as they look at their procurement organizations? Kind of any thoughts, or have you seen perhaps a shift over the last few years in this regard?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think you and I are going to talk about utility supply chain quite a bit, and utilities add another dimension, which is diverse supplier. Well, and some other industries do this too, but it is a specific focus in the utility industry. Diverse supplier spend, or spend with the diverse suppliers or disadvantaged suppliers, and that has ebbed and flowed over time. We've seen a huge push maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago now, huge push in that area. And then a little bit of an ebb over the last, say, 5 years or so. And companies saying, well, wait a minute, I don't want to spend a single dollar more than I need to, even if it means that I'm giving it to a disadvantaged supplier. So let's make sure that we're evaluating all things being equal. Then if everything's equal, let's make the award to the maybe the diverse supplier, the disadvantaged supplier, whatever it might be. But other than that, I'm not doing it. And then now we've seen a relaxing on that and a little bit more of a flow and sort of a what's reasonable. And in the utilities, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but utilities are unique in that they have an obligation to serve their ratepayers. And this is the community in large. And so you can just think about your own utility where you live. Surely there's a very, very large range of ratepayers, of customers for the utility. There's wealthy folks and non-wealthy folks. There's folks of all colors and all races and all walks of life within the utility's geographic footprint. The utility says, I want my supplier base to look like my customer base. So that's kind of a neat way for utilities to make sure that they are serving the community that they're serving the community they serve, if you will. So, so sustainability, I think, includes all of that.
So let's jump into kind of procurement for the utility sector. And the thing that's top of mind for me is, how does procurement function in this particular industry? It's something that impacts each and every one of us, right? When we think about the fact that when the sun goes down, our lights need to turn on, we're able to do this digitally because we have easy and affordable access to electricity. But what does the procurement function look like? It's probably something that we don't learn about at school. We don't probably talk about really in our average business setting. But on the back of that, what might be idiosyncratic or very specific to this industry when it comes to setting up a robust procurement organization or capability?
The first, I'll double click on or I'll respond to your question about, what does procurement in the utility industry look like? And I'm going to take a step up and talk about the utility industry in general. And I'm going to start with what I said before, just to build on that. So utilities have a territory where they serve, let's go with electricity. There's different kinds of utilities. There's gas, electric, water, wastewater. But let's just stick with electricity. Use that example, and I think that's a great one. So an electric utility will have an obligation to serve the customers in their service territory and provide them with electricity that is always there. And your expectation is that you turn the light switch on in your house and the light always goes on. And it doesn't matter if you're, again, white skin, brown skin, wealthy, not wealthy, it doesn't matter. Your light goes on when you flip the switch. And so the utilities have that obligation to serve. Now, it's a monopolistic industry. Nobody else provides electricity in that region. And so they're regulated by a commission, usually a statewide commission, that rules on financials, investments, rate of return, because many of the larger utilities are also public. So they have a responsibility to shareholders. So then there's a rate of return that they're allowed to generate off the amount that each ratepayer pays for the electricity, which covers the cost of running the utility, operating and maintaining and upgrading the infrastructure, and then providing a rate of return to the owners, to the shareholders. So it's a pretty complicated financial model. And what happens in this industry is there's this manifests into a acute focus on capital versus O&M dollars. Because just think about this for a second. The utility goes to the commission and says, I want to spend money on the capital infrastructure. I want to put new poles up, upgrade the wires, expand out to a different area, whatever it might be. And the commission says, yes, go for it. All right. They're allowed to then earn a rate of return on that asset base. That's how a utility works. But then the utility says, well, I've got staff aug and office space, and I need somebody to cut the grass at my headquarters building. And the utility and the industry there, the commission's like, I don't really care about that stuff. And so that's expense dollars versus capital dollars. And so there's this very different focus in the utility industry on the difference in the importance of those two. Think about planned work and asset infrastructure and upgrades versus unplanned or O&M. Now, that sounds pretty simple the way I talk about it, but there's tons of overlap and tons of complexity around that. And so the utility's responsibility is to manage both. Procurement's responsibility is to manage both. But we'll get into these conversations with clients and they'll say, well, wait a minute, I don't want to reduce my capital expense because I earn a rate of return. So I'm actually incented to spend more capital dollars. Well, not really. There's an account and you do earn a rate of return. But what if we could do more work for the same amount of money? Oh, okay, the light goes off. So procurement has a heightened responsibility in the utility industry to use the right language, to pick the words carefully. Savings, sometimes. Doing more with less, doing more with the same, stretching the budget, doing more. So these are the kind of things that procurement has to do. So now we're getting into some of the idiosyncrasies, the second part of your question about how procurement needs to be successful in this space. And I think to bring it home here, procurement's responsibility is to demonstrate to the business, the operating businesses that they serve, that they're there to help them achieve their objectives. So procurement is there to help the business achieve the objective of putting more poles in the ground, putting newer wires in the infrastructure. And so that's really no different than any other industry. That's what procurement's for. The difference is in the details, in the language, in the approach. So we're still the same, but yet there are some differences.
So the one thing I do want to kind of discuss is over the last 2 years, it's probably not news to anybody that our consumption and demand for electricity is kind of secularly increasing. That has to do with ongoing electrification efforts, but more recently, the data center boom on the back of AI permeating all different parts of our economy. And so is that a forcing function to kind of reshape how procurement is thought of, how it's practiced and operated for this industry? Or what are perhaps some of the repercussions of this kind of mega trend for the utility sector in this regard?
Well, I think you nailed it. The utility industry will go through a change, and then procurement will have to adapt and evolve. So first, the utility industry is going through a change. You nailed it. Electrification is huge. If every single house on your street plugged an electric car in, the grid would fail. So how far away are we from that? 10 years ago, pretty much nobody had electric cars. Now half the street is electric cars, or a quarter of the street is electric cars. So how long until we have a grid problem? So utilities are looking at infrastructure capacity. Now that's being offset by houses like mine with solar roof and a battery in the garage, and I can charge my own car, and I can help the utility now manage the grid usage, supply and demand by generating electricity in the day, storing it, and then giving it back, selling it to the utility between 4 and 10 p.m. when the usage is highest, and then charging my car at 2 o'clock in the morning. So there are ways to manage this through time-based metering and things like that. So the utilities are facing a rapid and acute need to upgrade the infrastructure, because even with all that dynamic that I just described, at a utility scale, there's an issue. We need to upgrade capacity from the house, down the street, at the substation, and ultimately to the generator. Now, procurement's role is to do what procurement does best. Like I said before, work with a business unit. What needs do you have? Okay, we need to upgrade the substations. Great. Is that a construction contract? Is it an EPC contract? Are we buying equipment? Wait a minute. Some of that equipment is now 3-4 year lead time. So procurement should come to the table with information, competitive information, market information that will help the business unit plan their deployment model, so that they're not caught, last minute understanding that, oh, this thing I need is now not ready, and I need to wait and to change the project, delay the project, whatever it might be. So procurement is coming to the table with market information, relevant information about suppliers and equipment and construction and resource capabilities, and helping the business plan for these upgrades that we need to do. Second, procurement needs to bring resources with expertise in this space. So digging ditches is very different from internet-enabled devices. So what we find is that the nature of the construction work has changed. We still need to dig the ditch. We still need to put the infrastructure in the ditch. We still need electricians, but now some of the skills we need for some of the sensors, and as we move towards a more integrated IoT environment, procurement needs to come to the table with knowledge about what this stuff is and who owns the IP and where's the data go and what are the protections and how are the cybersecurity protections all included from the supplier's supplier, who's the utility customer. It's a much more complex environment. So procurement has to upskill.
How do you see this kind of playing a role in encouraging a world, or maybe perhaps encouraging isn't the right word, enabling a world that can adopt renewable energy sources, whether it's kind of this rise of nuclear, and you've seen a lot of capital flood into that market over the last decade, or even kind of alternatives that are much more commonplace. You mentioned solar. In our portfolio, we have investments in and around hydrogen. But where does procurement kind of almost be that enablement in order to help those things start to embed inside of our utility value chain?
It's interesting. The one place historically procurement does not play in the utility supply chain and procurement world is buying power. So actually just buying electricity. There's usually like a trading floor that buys electricity, but also in developing large scale infrastructure like a wind farm, a solar farm, very, very little new hydro generation going on. Nuclear I'm really, really excited to see nuclear back on the table. It is by far I think the most exciting option for us to pursue at scale. But the runway is so long for new nuclear. Where procurement can play is evolving the knowledge and expertise of construction, EPC, PPA, purchase power agreements, things that are more that are a little bit more nuanced maybe than a traditional procurement environment of going and buying a widget or going and buying a service or going and negotiating a contract, but really understanding, how do you write a contract that's multi years hundreds of millions of dollars, huge development in infrastructure. It's a very, very different procurement skill set than the person that maybe buys, well, let's use an extreme example, the person that buys paper clips. So procurement, again, it's the knowledge gap, it's the talent, training and knowledge improvement of the procurement team to step up and do more and interesting things that are more influential and impactful for the utility.
So I guess perhaps related to that, when COVID hit, the one thing internally at Dynamo we were talking a lot about is the concept of anti-fragility or resilience
Yeah.
in value chains. And clearly, utilities are essential infrastructure. We cannot really function as a citizen base if you start to trim back on our access or ability to use electricity, telecommunications, gas, what have you. And so, what have you seen, or in kind of your career over several decades, you've likely been able to see how utility supply chains themselves have become more resilient to disruption. And if I have to guess, key to that is, procurement playing a role in that and allowing that to happen. But would love to kind of hear your take and perhaps kind of reflect on where the industry was and how far it's come thus far.
Yeah, and maybe we pause for a second and we talk about procurement versus supply chain. And in the utility industry, procurement is part of supply chain. Supply chain means procurement and materials management. And so the reason that I bring that up first is one of the first things that pops into my mind is what happened in COVID. The fragility of the supply chain was just in time manufacturing completely broke. Completely
Yep.
broke. So how many hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on consulting studies and implementation of best practices? Sort of we all think about the Toyota model where the truck backs up and like unloads the seats for the car right as the car comes to the point where it needs seats, and the person like literally takes the seats off the truck, puts them in the car. There's no storage, there's no handling, there's no, right? It's a super, super hyper efficient supply chain. Well, COVID broke all that. And that's really a supply chain material flow analysis combined with the procurement strategy. What we've seen in the utility industry is we see less of that, but we see something else. And so we see less of that because utilities need to have spares. So capital spares is a common thing, but there's also storm equipment and storm response. I mean, with the increase of severity and frequency and magnitude of storms, whether depending on where you live, it could be a wildfire or hurricanes. These storms are getting much, much worse and much more severe, and the impact on the utilities are getting much, much greater. So utilities always have storm kits. There's a huge section of the warehouse, which is basically devoted to stuff they need to grab and go quickly when there's a storm and they need to restore power. So utilities actually have done a pretty good job historically of managing that type of mindset. And so for utilities, like they never really were just in time. However, who manages the inventory, where the inventory is like physically stored, owned, and then managed is a constant discussion that we're having. Like, do we need to refresh that model now? And I think utilities, when I said they didn't go into the just in time, but they did actually rely on suppliers to manage the inventory, which is fine. And it's still fine as long as there are very clear rules and expectations and KPIs, and that we track how much inventory do you have to have for me and where is it? And I go and check regularly and make sure it's there and all of that. But that sort of inventory integrated supply chain management becomes even more important. I think I guess what I'm saying is the level of transparency and communication between the business, procurement, supply chain, and the suppliers to make sure that it's all flowing in the right way is even more important now. And that will address the fragility. The second issue, which is probably the bigger issue that utilities are facing now, is just like when COVID hit and we all wanted a bicycle, a fishing pole, and a raft and a boat, and we couldn't buy any of those things because all the stores were out of them. And now coming out of COVID, the shortages are in different materials. And so utilities have shortages in certain materials that they're looking for because the capital infrastructure, the expenditures and the investments were slowed down a little bit in COVID. And now there's a big resurgence. Everybody needs lots of stuff, and that stuff is in short supply depending on where it's from. And it's a result of a whole bunch of different things. It's global, geopolitical, global supply chain issues. There's nobody blocking the Suez Canal currently, but that was an issue. Manufacturing challenges and shortages, raw materials. And so there are specific pieces of equipment that utilities are working on. And to address that, we need the same thing I talked about before. It's a improved level of transparency and communication from the business to procurement to the supplier. And it's that integrated supply chain. There's plenty of room for improvement in that, in the utility integrated supply chain world.
And if I may, if you could kind of step back and survey those opportunities in this integrated supply chain, where would you start? Kind of where might you say there's low-hanging fruit in order to drive improvement and see fast results equally?
Well, it's the type of material that works for this model is the stuff that you see when you look out the window and you look at the pole and the wire and the transformer and the cross arm and the brace and the fuse and the switch and all that stuff that you see on the pole. That is basically the distribution infrastructure. And the reason I use that as the best example is that's on every single street, on every corner, on every street in the entire country. So everybody needs it, and managing that supply chain is the challenge. That's where some of the shortages are with some of that equipment. And there are suppliers who manage it and do a very, very good job. There are construction and service providers who also will manage it and bring to you the material with the crew when they're going to go do the work. And so, I mean, let's talk about that for a second. Are you going to do the work yourself and buy the equipment from somebody else? Are you going to have hire somebody else to do the work? And then are you going to give them the equipment, or are they going to bring their own equipment? So there are all these different operating models. And so procurement, knowing what the difference is between just a construction contract versus a construction with material versus let's add engineering and design into it and make it a full EPC. Who manages the liability? Who manages the cost? What's our strategy around that? Why? That's where procurement can start really upping their game and saying, look, I understand that you want to do X, Y, and Z. Therefore, I think this is the right contract. But as soon as you want to stop doing X, we should switch to this contract. Or let's do this to get us over this big workload hump, and then we'll transition the contract to a different type. That's where procurement's adding value versus just saying, hey, here's your redlined contract.
Yeah. Yep. Well, Conrad, thank you for giving us this primer in and around kind of the utility supply chain, the role of procurement within that operation. But I want to kind of wrap up with what I call my rapid fire closing. And what I'm basically going to do here is give you 3 statements, and we'll just love your immediate 1 to 2 minute reaction and response. You ready to go?
Sure, let's do it.
First up, the renewable energy source that you're most bullish on.
Well, I already talked about how much I like nuclear, but the limit's there. So then I'm going to add storage, batteries or pumped hydro storage or whatever it is, which will allow us to use solar and wind, which are really what I'm most bullish about. So I get the short answer is solar, wind with storage.
Next up, how did your experience as a mountaineer and skier impact just about how you take risk in and around the procurement function?
I love this one. You know, one of my favorite things to talk about, whether I'm climbing a mountain or creating a procurement strategy or category management strategy or something, helping a client with procurement, is optionality. It is absolutely critical. It's probably paramount importance that we preserve optionality. Because just like the just-in-time inventory failure, there was no option. There was no optionality. There was no alternative. And so procurement needs to manage risk. Like we are not going to avoid risk. We know that. And I know that from my personal endeavors, climbing and skiing. Risk is something to be managed, and you manage it by having optionality and preparation. So I know that sounds very generic, but it's so critical in everything you do. Preparation and optionality, preserving those choices and options to do something different should the situation change unexpectedly.
As an investor who counsels a variety of CEOs, I equally, the one thing you'll hear me remind them from time to time is retain optionality. Don't close doors to yourself, because the business world's dynamic and you might find yourself wanting to pursue one of those options. And if you do something that shuts that door, you might regret it. So
Absolutely.
totally agree. And then last up here in this sequence, the most underrated tool or workflow technology that you swear by.
Oh, hands down, it's Microsoft Excel. Everybody laughs at Excel or is embarrassed to say they use Excel. But look, at the end of the day, it's critical to do the hard work, to understand the data, you understand how it works, and then you can evolve it into some fancy tool. And I use Excel constantly. It's open on my computer all day long. Literally, I don't think I've closed Excel other than to restart my computer probably in 25 years. Number one.
Amazing. I would agree with you in and on Excel. And more often than not, I find that we go towards this bloated, over-engineered thing when all we need are some rows and columns, and it's good enough, at least for that early primitive state of problem solving.
Yeah, I mean, there's much better answers for the future of procurement and an innovative workflow management model and procurement orchestration and all that stuff. But I'm going back to basics on this one.
Amazing. Well, with that, Conrad, much appreciated. Thank you for joining us here on the Future Supply Chain, and look forward to seeing how you and the team at ProcureAbility are helping, I guess, create and do your part in the future of the utility sector here in the U.S.
You know, it's been a super fun ride for us. It continues to be so. We're really, really excited about the future. And I appreciate you having us on today, Santosh, to talk about a little bit about what we're doing and what we're seeing out there. So appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Follow us at dynamo.vc for all the latest episodes. We'll see you next time.